tensions between Israel and Egypt have been rising for a very long time, but they've been escalating so much since the 7th of October and following Egypt's refusal, despite the global pressure, despite the pressure from the United States and from Israel to expel the Palestinians after the 7th of October. And up until now, Israel has a lot of tensions with them. But a recent report from an Israeli website that is concerned with the military analysis and intelligence. It was an analysis of how Israel can attack Egypt's high dam. Sparked outrage, and then there was a response coming from a man called Mustafa Bakri, who's a member of the People's Assembly of Egypt. And I will get to the actual proposal on this website and the many dangerous and realistic things that they were speaking about in that analysis. Mustafa Bakri said that, oh, you're threatening to attack the high dam. Any clash between Tel Aviv and Cairo, we will be in Tel Aviv the following day. We will be in Tel Aviv the following day in case of any clash. The Egyptian army will overtake Tel Aviv in one day. Other analysts said, well, listen, this website is not very well known. It's not going to make a lot of impact. But again, in Egypt, they are monitoring everything that's happening in Israel. And the proposal to attack the Aswan High Dam has been there for a very long time, with previous statements from the previous Israeli defense minister, Avigdor Lieberman. Avigdor Lieberman, he held senior positions in Israel, and he also threatened with that. Okay, what did this analysis talk about exactly? Well, it spoke about many important things, and it included other analysis to do with Egypt and its position with Israel, the prospect of going for a war. It's calling for Israel to take a preemptive strike against Egypt because of the recent threats. They said, according to an AI report that they published on their website, attacking the dam by Israel. They said, we might use armor-piercing missiles or other advanced weapons, destroying the dam structure or creating a controlled collapse that leads to the release of water. Within minutes, millions of cubic meters of water begin to flow down the Nile River. 1 to 3 hours, the initial flooding and immediate danger. Waves of enormous force begins to flood the Luxor and Aswan areas, causing immediate destruction of infrastructure. Military bases and industrial facilities along the Nile are flooded. Thousands of deaths in the first few hours, mainly in rural areas. Then they continued what's going to happen in the 3rd to 6th hours. Cairo metropolis, over 20 million residents, enters a state of emergency as the surge advances. Power outage, complete disruption of transportation and communication systems. The Egyptian army begins evacuating flooded areas and attempting to rescue civilians. And the most dangerous part comes between the 6th and 12th hours. Urban collapse, they called it in this analysis. Cairo's industrial areas are completely shut down. Office towers and old buildings collapse. The Egyptian army loses control of the city. Due to the chaos, refugees begin to move en masse to higher ground, but many drown. And the conclusions and results are alarming. Minimum casualties, 1.7 million dead, with a maximum casualties number of 10.5 million. A possible collapse of the state occurs quickly without preparation, and if the chaos in Cairo leads to the complete collapse of the state, with indirect deaths from famine and epidemics. The impact depends greatly on the Egyptian government's ability to respond in a timely manner and on the state of the infrastructure of the capital. The release of such report on this website, concerned primarily with this intelligence analysis around Egypt and other countries too, again, is very alarming, especially because they're not only concerned with this hypothetical attack. This website is talking about other analysis as well when it comes to Egypt. They had another article published just a few days back saying the urgent preparation required for an Egyptian military threat on Israel's borders. Saying that we must understand better the players around us. Look at the means and capabilities of the adversary and the actions and try and guess their intentions. They're primarily focused about Egypt, the biggest threat next to them, according to this report. We need to increase the army's defense, they're saying, and this increased threat that's coming, it's coming from Iran, it's coming from Turkey, and it's coming from Egypt. In this respect, this is a strategic window of time, perhaps the one-time opportunity to try and attack Egypt. It's a big Muslim country. They're saying the population hates us. The peace agreement is riddled with holes, with blatant violations. More and more Egyptian forces in the Sinai Peninsula, strengthening of infrastructure, armament, and military in every dimension, with an emphasis on very broad preparations that have no other honest interpretation, they said, other than a military confrontation with Israel. They also said that Egypt has provocative moves against us, like the positioning of Egyptian tanks right on the southern border of Israel. And they're also questioning the level of involvement of Egypt when it comes to arming Hamas during this war. They said this is unknown to us, but it is clear that at least in relation to smuggling large amounts of weapons, that they likely took an active and malicious part when it comes to exhausting Israel strategically and weaken Israel. And they also mentioned that in Gaza, various sporadic findings were found throughout the war that support the hypothesis that parts of Egyptian standard weapons were smuggled into the Gaza Strip. And they're saying that these intentions of Egypt are evil when it comes to Israel. They also added that in the Egyptian army, they have huge conventional capabilities in the air, in the land, in the sea, in Sinai, tunnels, crossings, bridges, under the Suez Canal, huge reserves of fuel, ammunition, anti-aircraft weapons, armored vehicles, spare parts, airports, naval ports, fortified headquarters, numerous bunkers, and more on a huge scale and with huge budgets. And now they're saying that we have a situation now with the Palestinian cause, especially with Donald Trump's statements, and this could be a pretext for Egypt to actually invade as a preventative measure. They're saying this way they can justify the use of aggression against Israel and gain support from the axis that oppose Israel if they have such an invasion, like Russia and China. They're saying that there's a very realistic opportunity for Egypt to attack Israel because of the ethnic cleansing plans of Donald Trump and the level of threat that this poses against Egypt, not only for the Palestinian cause, but also against Egypt. And they continued to analyze the prospects of U.S. intervention. They said the U.S. might intervene, but we can have a coordination between Turkey and Egypt that can prevent some of the armaments coming to Israel. Russia, China, North Korea, they might have provocative measures anywhere else to distract the United States from supporting us as well. Now, they resulted to the conclusion that Israel and the relevant officials in the government, the army, the intelligence, everything, they need to urgently prepare Israel for a possibility of another war with Egypt and prepare everything in terms of diplomacy, info, budget, military development, and the pool of necessary things that they need to do when it comes to Egypt. Now you're talking about full-scale preparation, this analysis, and that's why the previous report of attacking the High Egyptian Dam raised so many eyebrows in Egypt. Is there a reason for Israel to worry? There is genuine reason for Israel to worry. Many of the things described here are actual on the ground. The levels of drills, the equipment, the military forces, the closeness to Rafah, the statements that are coming from Egypt in support of the Palestinian people, and their analysis is to a very large extent based on evidence coming from the ground. And one of the biggest things, the biggest indications that Egypt is preparing very heavily, especially against Israel, is the fact that Egypt now very quietly just obtained a Chinese J-10CE fighter jet. Arrived in Egypt. They quietly went and purchased it from China by the end of 2024, and now there are reports in from multiple military sources that they actually received this. Why is this very significant? Egypt already has a large fleet of F-16 fighter jets. They have the second largest fleet of French Rafales. They also have other fighter jets. They tried to get the Su-35s. However, the United States banned them under sanctions threats and the fact that Russia was facing sanctions at the time. But the problem is the capabilities that they are given with the F-16s and with the Rafales too, they do not really meet the demands of Egypt. What are these demands? Well, the Americans and the French do not arm Egypt with long-range, medium to long-range air-to-air missiles. Those are very necessary to give Egypt the edge on Israel. Israeli lobbying constantly prevented these two countries, France and the United States, from allowing Egypt to have these missiles. However, the solution came from China. After, of course, it failed with the purchase of the Su-35s. The solution came from China. They can bypass the sanctions, and these fighter jets that came from China, they have approximately 300-kilometer range of air-to-air missiles. Why is that so important, and why is that a very big shift in the power levels in the region? It's because if the Egyptian forces, they wanted to attack any potential Israeli fighter jets, they can attack them without them being in sight. You're talking about a very large distance. The fact that the fighter jets are Chinese, that means they don't consider other fighter jets as friendly fighter jets, because both Israel and Egypt have F-16s, for example. Who knows if something might be tampered with in case a war breaks out between the two countries. Now the solution comes from China. And that's a big indication about the level of preparation coming from Egypt for a war with Israel. How likely that would be? Of course, there's a big diplomatic way between, of course, having an all-out war and reducing the tensions that are happening between Egypt and Israel. There's a very big argument that they're not prepared militarily to have anything with a conventional army, let alone a conventional army the size of Egypt, the political climate, the global climate, the United States' lack of interest to engage in a war, another war in the region. All of these things indicate that it's quite unlikely. However, the statements that are being made, the fact that there's a country that is an entity of terror that committed such a massive barbaric genocide against innocent civilians just next to Egypt and on the Egyptian borders, all of that raises the possibility of having some conflict at some point between Egypt and Israel.